stick their cigarettes up here that I quit smoking a long time ago, so.
We'll say candy cane up there.
I wrote this song a long time ago, and I don't think I've ever done it live before, so, and indeed I probably don't remember it either, so. It's called Untidy World. Now some people worry about things they can't see, and others they worry about things they can't be. And some are the sinners, others the saints. Well, some folks are both, but mostly they ain't. Don't you worry about taking a stand. The future's always at hand, and nobody here in command. It's a mighty untidy world. Now some are just striving to make the next buck, hoping to buy themselves some good luck. Now big stone, big splash, big gun, big flash, much pain, no gain, leaving on the next train. Don't you worry about taking a stand. Future's always at hand, and nobody here's in command. It's a mighty untidy world. Now some folks that want this world to end, they got nothing left but the fees to put in. Where they lust for the limelight, they preach from a satellite. They're sitting on dynamite, waiting for the Nazarite. Won't you worry about taking a stand. The future's always at hand, and nobody here's in command. It's a mighty untidy world. It's a mighty untidy world. It's a mighty untidy world. Let's see where that's gone. I'm gonna tell you something. Yeah, what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna quit this way of living. Try something new. I'm gonna find me a woman in black leotards, make us lots of money, reading people's tarot cards, living on love, cigarettes and wine. Now everything is so good, living on bohemian time. I'm gonna write me a book, every word will be true. I know I've got one in me, maybe two. I'm gonna write me a poem. I'm putting ink to page, just driving a line to the postmodern age. And dangling words don't even need to rhyme. A man of erudition, living on bohemian time. I'm gonna write me a song on my old guitar. Leotard won't lose. It's gonna make me a star. I'm gonna paint a picture, bare my soul in oil, the pride and the passion. Paint pot's gonna boil. Big summer sketches, I love a wandering line. I'm just a pocket Picasso, living on bohemian time. One more tune, Legal Medicine Blues. I wrote this song. Bear, how long ago did I write this song? Long time, eh?
Yeah, 2002.
2002. I got that written down somewhere, eh? This is Gary Stark, my friend, and he and Jackie Brickert have an organization called Imley, and they've been fighting this good fight that we're going to talk about. Jon Erpenbach's going to talk about tonight, and they've given many of their years of their lives to this, so they inspired me to write this song, so I did. I take everything that they give me. I take all the potions and pills, and maybe they work, and maybe they don't. Sometimes I get the feeling I got my own prescription, gets me through the day with the night. Doctor's name is Mercy, my pharmacist's name is God. I got the way you're gonna make the medicine I take, leave medicine lose. I thought this was America, why I'm free to choose. Now don't you quote the law to me, if you do you're gonna lose. I got the way you're gonna make the medicine I take, legal medicine blues. Where it grows and fields and on a farm, it grows in the valley wide. It grows great on the fire escape, it grows on the mountainside. Flowers and leaves up to the eaves, sometimes it helps me see. If nature made it so easy to find, why won't you let me be? I got the way you're gonna make the medicine I take, legal medicine blues. Thought this was America, why I'm free to choose. Don't you quote the law to me, if you do you're gonna lose. I got the way you're gonna make the medicine I take, legal medicine blues. Now and then, in minute of conscience, I really do need a friend. I never wanted to break the law, but it hurt too bad to pretend. Now listen, you lawmakers, I'm reaching out my hand. You gotta realize, you gotta legalize. Everybody say amen.
Amen.
Amen. You gotta, when you gonna make the medicine I take, legal medicine blues. I thought this was America, why I'm free to choose. Now don't you quote the law to me, if you do you're gonna lose. I got the when you're gonna make the medicine I take, legal medicine blues. Bring up State Senator Jon Erpenbach now, and he's going to talk about this upcoming legislation that you're sponsoring right now.
Yep, thanks. I appreciate it. And thank you for the book. Hi, everybody. Jon Erpenbach, State Senator from Middleton, born and raised there, and I ran for office quite a long time ago. I'm not going to tell you how long, because some of you I've known ever since I've been in office. It's just going to make you feel older too, so I won't say that. But I'm telling you that to tell you this. One of the very first listening sessions I ever had, I was really nervous walking in, and I see Gary there. Gary Stork was there, north side of Madison Community Center, and I talked about what's going on in the legislature at the time, which wasn't much at that time. We still got along, everybody was okay at the Capitol. He hits me with, what about marijuana? And I'm like getting nervous, well, what about marijuana? So I'm thinking, what about marijuana? So Gary talks about the medicinal purposes of marijuana and what it means to him and what it means to others who are suffering with chronic diseases, who are constantly in pain, who are dealing with leukemia and all of that other stuff. And I never once knew about the idea of marijuana. I knew all about marijuana in high school. Used marijuana in high school. My junior year was not real good. But the last time I'd actually used marijuana was, I think maybe when I was 20, 19 or 20. And by that time, I think I got elected as what, maybe 35, something like that. So it was about 15 years. So I didn't know. So Gary starts ticking these things off and getting really medical, getting, the verbiage he was using was like, God, this guy's a doctor, he's got a PhD in pot, what's the deal? But I told him I would look into it, and I did. And I talked to people who I never once in a million years thought would ever use marijuana for anything other than to get high. And then all of a sudden I started hearing about, well, when my mom was struggling with cancer, she would bake pot into brownies. And I'd say, why would she do that? And he said, well, a couple of reasons. First of all, it was the only way she could actually maintain an appetite through chemo. It was the only way she could actually keep food down during chemo. And they could load her up with all sorts of other pills. You take this pill to do that, and then there's side effects with this pill, so we're going to give you this pill to deal with the side effects of this pill, but there's side effects on this pill, so we're going to give you another pill to deal with all of the side, and it's just on and on and on and on. And so I did some more research on it, and Gary was right. It's people from all walks of life. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Conservative, Liberal, all walks of life. One end of the state to the other, everybody knew somebody, whether it was themselves or a family member or a good friend using marijuana for medical purposes. And I talked to some veterans at the time. This is a very big issue with our veterans. Veterans are becoming much more are louder on this issue, the idea of taking marijuana and making it legal for medical purposes and so on. So we introduced legislation, which is actually it got a lot of attention at the time, introducing marijuana for medical purposes, not full-blown legalization, just medical purposes, and it got a lot of time because of marijuana. I did more research on it, and I'm absolutely thoroughly convinced that the idea of marijuana and the stigma that is attached to it, the pharmaceutical companies did a really, really good job of just blackballing marijuana like you wouldn't believe. Just, it's bad, it's this, it's all this. It's not. there are people I know who use it, and they didn't choose to get cancer, they didn't choose to get glaucoma, they didn't choose some sort of chronic pain that they have, and they have to live their life through it, and they take the medication that the doctor has told them to take all over the years, and they finally said, to hell with it. And so a family member goes out and breaks the law and gets marijuana somewhere, and then they choose to ingest it however they choose to ingest it, whatever works out best for them. Now, I know that there are Republicans whose family member has used it for medical purposes. I know that there are Republicans who would support this legislation if it ever got out of committee, which it won't right now. I know that there are Republicans who are dead set against this because it's a slippery slope and so on and so forth and yada, yada, yada. And I remind them that, and because we've had this debate, not on the floor, but not even in committee, just me talking with other members of the state senate. I think in every state where medical marijuana is legal, the opioid overdoses are down in every state. And we just moved heaven and earth to do what we can to try and deal with opioid addiction, which is a very, very tragic thing. I've been to a couple of funerals of my daughter's friends who have overdosed and died, and it's a bad, bad thing. And so we do what we can to try and help law enforcement and try and help the individual and so on and so forth. This is the one thing we could do that we are not doing, that we know in other states overdoses have dropped where marijuana is legal for medical purposes. And by the way, I think that's about 28 states now, and I think the District of Columbia, I think that's roughly the number where marijuana is either fully legal or legal for medical purposes. So the bill has been bottled up in committee, and I've introduced it with this time with Chris Taylor, and this is not the first time we've introduced this legislation. And we did the same thing that we did when we were working with Jackie and Gary on the legislation, take it around the state. The only way we're going to do this is to take it around the state, talk to reporters, talk to groups, and it's like this. I see a lot of people shaking their heads when they talk. This could be Eau Claire, this could be Kenosha, this could be Superior, it could be anywhere in this state, and heads will start nodding in agreement because everybody knows somebody. So the legislation is really specific. You have to have a relationship with your doctor. This is going to be a situation where a doctor can just set up shop down the street and start signing off on medical marijuana. And very specific diseases that people are dealing with, very, very specific conditions chronic conditions that people are dealing with. And if you can grow plants in your house, but you're very limited in the number that you can have, and so on. So the legislation makes sense. It's a good piece of legislation, and I can't get it going anywhere. So we came up with the idea of, well, let's just have a statewide referendum on it. So we have another piece of legislation that would allow for a statewide referendum on medical marijuana. And it wouldn't be binding, meaning it wouldn't become law if it passed. It's an advisory referendum. And I can't get that through committee because I think those who oppose this know what the results are going to be. I think it's going to be 70 to 80% of Wisconsinites support this. The last poll I saw, I think 68% of people support this. And again, it's because they've been touched by somebody who's gone through a very, very difficult situation. And the only way they can maintain any sort of sanity, any sort of ability to reason, any sort of ability to deal with the pain that they have is through the use of medical marijuana. There are veterans who are coming forward now on the record saying, yes, I use marijuana every day. There's a veteran who has a bag full of pills that he has been prescribed and that he will not take anymore. So, you know, to you and I, it makes a lot of sense. It's common sense, and there are a couple of people in positions of power right now at the Capitol who won't even let me have a hearing on it. The only time we did have a hearing on it was when, it was a while ago.
2009, December 15th.
Yeah, so that was a little while. 2009, December 15th. It was a, no pun intended, joint hearing between the Senate and the Assembly. It was, health committees. And, it was, got a little feisty there because there was a legislator who accused me of wanting to legalize drugs all over the place. And it's like, God. And I got really upset with her and I said, I have 2 kids, I don't want drugs legal, but I do want people to have access to their medicine. And doctors used to be dead set against this. Now individual doctors, medical society is still opposed to this, but individual doctors are now coming out and saying, yeah, this is, look, yeah, yes. They don't like the idea of smoking it, but they like the idea of getting it into their system one way or another. So there are doctors who are now starting to speak out, and that all helps. So that's what's going on with the legislation. That's what it's all about. There's nothing going on with it. I wish I could say, hey, we got a hearing coming up, after the first of the year, and we'll have it up in the Senate floor, but I know we won't. But that doesn't mean we won't continue to still talk about this. Chris Taylor and I spent time in La Crosse, Wausau, Green Bay, Milwaukee, and I'm missing one place, a couple of months ago, just going around the state talking about this issue. And again, I do think if there were a referendum on this and we're on the ballot, 70 to 80% of Wisconsinites would support it. I really believe that. So, you have any questions on that issue at all? Or any other issues at the Capitol? Yes?
Yeah. In your opinion, are the roadblocks more pharmaceutical companies spending money here, lobbying against it, or is it a culture wars kind of thing?
I think it's
causing opposition?
I think it's a culture war right now, only because I haven't seen the pharmaceuticals show up and say, "Oh, you can't pass this." If this bill ever had a hearing, I would tend to think that the pharmaceutical companies would quietly start ramping up opposition to this. And they will talk about how well there's Marinol. And this is another thing I learned from Gary, that there are certain cannabinoids in the plant itself that can't be captured in a lab. And in order for marijuana to actually work for you medically, you have to have every single one of those cannabinoids. And Marinol doesn't do the trick. But the pharmaceutical companies, my guess, would start publicly, at least quietly, ramping things up. And then if it were actually coming up for a vote in the full-blown Senate, they'd probably do a full court press. That'd be my guess. But you think about this. They haven't been successful in 28 other states. The pharmaceutical companies haven't been. So I take that as a pretty good sign. Yes?
I was just wondering what are the other states' laws for medical marijuana? Are they similar to what you're proposing?
They vary. If ours were to pass, it would probably be one of the stricter medical marijuana laws on the books. And we learned from other states when Colorado first did, I think it was Colorado when they first did medical, and then they went full-blown legalization. There were some issues in Colorado. And so we took a look at what other states were doing since we've introduced this more than once to say, okay, what did work, what didn't work, and what would work here in Wisconsin. So it would be, I hate to say this, but the only way I can get any sort of support right now is tightly regulated. Doctors can't, you can't doctor shop. You have to have, it has to be your physician who's going to sign off on this. And although the doctor cannot legally prescribe, the doctor will have to write a letter saying that yes, you can take it, because doctors cannot legally prescribe this marijuana because it's illegal federally. So and then the dispensaries would be regulated by the state, and the amount of plants that you could have, I can't remember the number, 12, something like 12 plants, 6 plants, 8 plants, somewhere in there. You can't have any more than that. So the alternative right now is, there's a pretty prominent family in Verona, Casey Fitzrandall's family. He's a speed skater. It was, I think, for his sister. Their family had to go out, and they came to a press conference and told us their story. Had to go out, break the law, get marijuana somewhere, to give to her sister who was dealing, I can't remember the issue she was dealing with, the disease she was dealing with at the time. I think it was cancer, but that's what they did. And they were brave enough to stand up and say, we're doing that. And I thought that would have been enough to put a little pressure on those who were getting in the way of this. And, it didn't. So, but we'll keep pushing it. Did you have a question?
Yeah, what about, there's something called CBD oil. What do you know about that? I know that it apparently is legal in the state. I know for a fact in a couple places in Madison it's for sale. I know several people who have used this, and apparently CBD oil is a non-euphoric version of marijuana. It's for sale, people are using it, and I've heard first-person accounts that it's helping. So
right.
What's the deal with that?
We did pass legislation. I'm surprised it's being sold in Madison. I was in favor of the legislation, except there was one thing in the legislation that was just atrociously bad, that we tried to fix that they wouldn't let us, and you're not gonna believe me that the bill that we passed actually did what it did, but that's what it does. So it's a derivative of it, and for some people in certain situations with certain health issues, yes. For other people in certain situations with certain health issues, they need the full plant. I think of people, and again, not being a doctor, just based on what people have told me, people with suffering from PTSD would much rather have the full plant and ingest it. People dealing with other specific issues, and this bill was passed because of a child dealing, and I can't remember the ailment she had, but it passed and they called it her name.
Lydia?
What?
Lydia?
Yeah, Lydia's Law. So here's the deal. So it is legal to possess CBD oil in this state. It is illegal to produce CBD oil in this state. That's what the legislation did, which means you have to go to Illinois and get it. It's also illegal to transport across state lines. That's a federal crime. So that was the thing when we were dealing with this legislation, and Lydia's family's up there in the gallery watching this. And they knew that this was in the legislation, that they couldn't produce it here, and that they would be forced to break a federal law to transport it across state lines. But they were desperate. And their perfect version would have been legal to make in this state and legal to obtain in this state. So we tried to fix that through an amendment, and if we would have passed that amendment, the bill would have failed, because a lot of Republicans would have then gotten off the bill and not voted for. And at the very least, we wanted to make sure that people in Lydia's situation, at the very least, legally could possess it, and nobody would go to jail. So that's what they came up with, the compromise to get the conservative Republicans on this legislation is, okay, let's say they can legally have it, but you can't make it in Wisconsin. And when we pointed out, you're forcing people to break a federal law now by going to Illinois and crossing state lines, that's not a state issue, that's a federal issue, they wouldn't address it. And so, voted for the bill, we tried to fix it, but yeah, no. And so that's when you say it's for sale in Madison, that is kind of surprising.
I'm not gonna tell you where.
No, I'm not gonna. Yeah.
Lydia passed away within 12 months of that hearing.
Did she really?
Yes, sir. That's how serious it is. And that's non-psychoactive ones.
Yeah,
So the nonpartisan hemp bill that passed,
yeah.
was there the same kind of hurdles that's going through with this? And the other thing is, what finally was the impetus? Was there money behind
The hemp?
getting the Republicans to?
No, they
embrace
focus,
it?
they focus more so on the ag production and industrial use of it, meaning shirts, rope,
Right.
whatever. That was the main focus of that, and the governor, did he sign it? I don't know if he signed it.
Yeah, he did.
He did, okay. I know he was having second thoughts about whether he should or shouldn't sign it. But, you know, if he signed it, that means it's gonna be so tightly regulated that there's no way in the world, you know, anything other than industrial production of hemp's gonna happen. But, no, it was more a focus on the ag stuff, and we've talked about that too with medical marijuana, but it wouldn't be produced it's not like a farmer could go out and grow a pot, because it's not full legalization. And even in full legalization states, I think growing pot's pretty tightly controlled, pretty tightly regulated, so. Yes,
How do you address the issues if someone's going to drive while under the influence?
you can't. Yeah, you can't operate heavy machinery, meaning a car. You can't, but at the same time, it's not like somebody's gonna go to a bar and get high and then drive the car home, they're gonna stay home. And odds are you're dealing with some people with some very severe health issues, so driving isn't really as much of a concern. But yeah, you can't operate heavy equipment, meaning you can't drive, you can't get in a tractor, you can't, you know, ride a motorcycle, drive a motorcycle, that kind of stuff.
But there's no way to test for it, so, I mean, that seems to be one of the issues that people against it is, I mean, that's a very logical kind of argument.
There's no way to test for it?
There is a way.
Right,
Just
there is.
because you can't doesn't mean that you won't.
Right, but no, I get that, but I think there is a way to test for it.
Is there just
For-
not been distributed
for
to law
content.
enforcement?
What's that?
There is, I'm asking, I don't know, it would make sense if someone could invent.
I think there is a test.
Oh,
5 nanogram rule in Washington State, is it? But that doesn't mean that that equals impairment.
Right,
That's the problem.
Right.
When you're drunk or assumed drunk,
Right.
there is an obvious impairment.
Right. The conditions that would qualify for medical uses, it's pretty severe. It's not like, oh, my back hurts, I wanna, you know, smoke a joint.
These
It's,
people are usually not driving themselves. And
well, some could. I mean, yeah, I mean,
no,
anybody,
it's a fair point too.
right, no,
Yes.
anybody who's dealing with cancer, for example, can drive a car.
Right.
But I don't think if somebody's going to use marijuana for medical purposes and they're dealing with cancer or whatever the health of PTSD, whatever, they're gonna be at home doing it. And, you know, it's not like they're gonna get in a car and go somewhere afterwards.
So it would just be.
I wouldn't think anyways, but.
So it would just be distributed like the same thing with opioids. So you shouldn't drive, you shouldn't drink,
Correct,
blah blah. Same
Yeah.
idea. Here's some weed.
Yeah. yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Other questions on this or any other issue at the Capitol? We have a lot of issues. It's almost like the entire state should be in group therapy, but,
But both sides have to be willing to go through it.
yeah, so, just real briefly, some of the bad stuff you've read about in the newspaper will pass, some of the bad stuff you've read about won't pass. Foxconn, you know, we gave them over $3 billion, or are in the process of giving that to them, and now $134 million to be taken away from other transportation projects to pay for a road that they need. And we're not even gonna get a chance to vote on that.
Yeah.
I can name a million roads in just my Senate district alone. Highway 60 up by Lodi is awful. If you get down on certain parts of Highway 78, it's not good. Certain parts of Highway 92, not good. And I'm not gonna get into the county roads right now. But that's money that's gonna be drained away from these programs to pay for Foxconn. And they're already getting over $3 billion, so that was really frustrating to see. We never, when we talked about this legislation, and we dealt with it on the finance committee that I sit on, and then we dealt with it on the Senate floor, never once was it brought to our attention that, oh yeah, they're gonna need a road. Never once was it brought to our attention, and that's really frustrating. So we're already bonding to give them, to expand, I think it's a 94 corridor down there, and now they need $134 million more.
To give jobs to Illinois people.
So yeah, that was frustrating.
How far do you think $3 billion would go, say, in economic development, say in northern and central Wisconsin?
So it could, $3 billion in economic development in northern, central, and southern Wisconsin. On Main Street, economic development you're talking about would go a long way. Would go a long way. And I tend to think would produce jobs that would actually stay, because in order to be competitive in the industry that Foxconn is in, you have to have low prices. And one way to get to low prices is through automation. And the worry is that we're gonna give them $1.5 billion that we won't get back to help them build it, and they'll automate shortly afterwards. You take $3.1 billion or 3.3, whatever it's gonna end up being, and you put that into schools, you put that into infrastructure, infrastructure puts people to work immediately. If you take that and you come up with Main Street programs for Mount Horeb, Cross Plains, Middleton, wherever, that will produce jobs that will be sustaining jobs. There's so much you could do with that money, that kind of money. So much you could do. Think about healthcare, you know, what we could do with something like that. Think about the idea of rather than cutting the UW system, you actually invest in it, rather than you invest in our technical school system too, because those are people who are graduating with skills that are needed to build the places for people who come up with the ideas who are graduating from someplace else in this state. So we could have done so much more with that money.
Is it a done deal? Suppose we get a Democratic governor?
It's a done deal. Yeah, it's a law. We would have to pass a law not to have Foxconn, and I don't know how that works. I mean, Foxconn starts getting checks from us for about, on average, $230-some million a year, starting in 2019. Or $230 million over the biennium starting in 2019.
So we have time.
We have time, but I tend to think it would be so hard to unravel. There will be contractual violations with the state that I think we would be looking at. I think it would be hard to undo. I do. Yes.
Can you tell them out there that I'm for small government and I would like them to not spend the money on Foxconn? I think we should have small, limited government.
Well, this is really interesting because the people that I'm dealing with ran against big government i.e. Madison, and they've turned around, just take a look at the environmental changes that they've made, and they have taken away local control and consolidated power in Madison. And these are people who ran against big government, and they made government bigger with just in the environmental arena alone. K-12 education, they're taking away even more authority from local school boards, and even to the point on municipalities as they want to take away Mount Horb's ability to handle labor issues locally, as opposed to, no, the state's not gonna do that. So yeah, they're taking away local control like you wouldn't believe. How you doing?
Good, hi Jim. Tell me, am I correct that the definition of fascism is the merging of government and industry? And if I'm right there, why hasn't that word been tacked on to this Foxconn deal?
Well, we couldn't tack any amendments on. So, biggest issue I have with Foxconn is there's this fake sense of accountability, that they don't get the money unless they produce the jobs. That's true for half of the money they're getting. We're not getting any of the money back that we put into this plant. Then that's $1.3 billion that will be out the door that we pay in cash. That is the first draw off of every state budget, moving forward for like the next 3 state budgets. So for the next 9 years, no, next 6 years, will be the draw for Foxconn right off the bat. That's before schools, that's before property tax relief, that's before anything. The definition of what I call the deal that they put together is actually insanity, and it's desperation. We have a governor who's not popular. We have a governor who has not lived up to his first campaign promise of 250,000 jobs, and he's had, what'll be 8 years when he's done to do it.
He was gonna do it his first year.
Yeah, his first year, yeah, it's no big deal, 250,000. If I was running, I would have said 251,000, you know, so that's how I came up with the numbers, just kind of pulled it out. So, but I call it really the definition of desperation. He's a desperate guy right now, and his numbers aren't going up that much, and he'll be tied to what's going on nationally. And so I think for him, it's a pretty difficult situation. So to him, $3.1 billion or $3.3 billion is worth it to try and get reelected. Now, if you get up, and I've been up around the state, you get outside of southeastern Wisconsin, this is not a popular thing. And even in parts of southeastern Wisconsin, it's not very popular. So I think he doesn't want to talk about this during his re-election, but he's going to have to. So, but to me, it's a definition of desperation.
What's jury management doing?
Redistricting? Yeah, we're still where we are. This is the most self-serving thing that any majority party does, and Democrats did it too. It is the most self-serving thing that any legislator does. Is we're talking redistricting, is draw their own districts. And ever since I've been on in the legislature, I've always been on a piece of legislation to take it out of the legislature's hands and either have the Legislative Reference Bureau do it or a panel of 3 judges do it. I don't care, just not us. It's not going anywhere. We're all waiting to see what's going to happen with the court decision. I was a little dismayed that the Republicans, they were under the court order, were supposed to be drawing a new map in conjunction with the lawsuits that were going on. So they got to stay on that so they don't have to draw a new map right now. So the Supreme Court could come out February, March, whatever it is, somewhere in there, and say, okay, Wisconsin's map is unconstitutional. So then the question becomes, they have to draw a new map. Do I live in the district that I am running for re-election? And it's a mess. Wow. So I still hope that they come out and that they say that the map's unconstitutional. I really hope that they do. And we'll deal with the fallout and the chaos after that. And it'll just be chaotic for one election cycle, and then we'll get it figured out. But I would much rather have the judges of the Supreme Court say that it's unconstitutional than it's constitutional, because if it's constitutional, we're gonna be stuck here for a while. And it's not fair. I would love it. I would love it if I were drawing the map, every seat would be 50-50 or as close to it as you could, because then people really do have a choice. And sometimes the Democrat wins, sometimes the Republican wins, sometimes you know, whatever. But the only downside to that is you'll be introducing a lot more money into our elections, which, you know, I think we have enough already, but, so, yeah.
One thing that frustrates me is that it seems that Democrats are they have an aversion to getting in front of a TV camera. Now, I'll go home tonight and I'll turn on television and Ron Johnson will be on there telling us what a great deal this tax bill is. And we'll see that ad 10 times today. And yet I don't hear the opposite story. It's just like there's this quiet over there.
Are you talking about the commercial that they're running right now? The TV
Well, that would
commercial?
be an example, but I mean, this
Okay.
goes on, you know, I spoke to Pocan about this and
You know what I
he
was,
didn't have much of an answer.
what I was upset about is I was really upset about the fact that this, even though he lost, I heard more about Roy Moore than I did about Doug Jones. And that really bothered me because they would talk about what's going on down there and oh yeah, Doug Jones is over here. Now, Jones won anyways, and that restored my faith in humanity. That night it was like a jubilant night, and we haven't had one of those in a while.
Yeah.
And we're, what, 1,200 or 800 miles away from where it was or whatever. But I felt like I was right there. It was awesome. We are, I don't want to say the loyal opposition, we're the loud opposition. But most of the time we won't get covered. Ron Johnson's the current U.S. Senator. They should have gotten Tammy's opinion on that, or they should have gotten another sitting U.S. Senator on the Democratic side opinion on that. Usually what they'll do is they'll say, you know, here's Ron Johnson, and then Johnson says what he's going to say, and then the news person comes back on and says, Democrats say this, this, and this.
Right.
It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens some of the time.
It happens a lot of the time, I noticed.
Yeah, but
Even NPR.
it just depends.
Yeah,
Well, I
even
tell you
NPR.
what, it's interesting because if you talk to a room full of the other side, they're gonna say the exact same thing you're saying, except opposite.
Except
So,
they're lying.
Well, they're lying, but it's that's why I just listen to sports talk. No, it's you know, and I gotta couch this because my wife's a news anchor. So, and I don't wanna get in trouble, with my wife. So basically, when you're putting together I can tell you all about MSNBC, cause I did that a lot for a while. On the, Act 10 stuff, I was on a lot, and occasionally they would have a Republican. When they didn't have a Republican on from the state, that means no Republican from the state would go on. There were times that I said no to Fox, for example, because I know it's just like, what's the point? And there were times I said yes, but if there isn't on the network, on the cable network stuff, if there isn't a response from the other side, it's because odds are the other side wouldn't go on. Right. There are very few Republicans that do Rachel Maddow's show for a reason. It's because she's, in my opinion, really good, really thorough, but she's probably the fairest one out of all of them, on all of the cable shows. She's fair.
I agree.
But you won't see many Republicans going on. And it's because they won't. It's not because she hasn't invited them or asked them, they won't. Same thing with Lawrence O'Donnell. Some Republicans will do, what's his name? He's getting louder as time goes on MSNBC. He's on...
Chris Hayes?
No, before. He worked for Tip O'Neill.
Chris
Matthews.
Yeah, Matthews. Yeah, he's getting louder, isn't he? Or is it me? So, there'll be Republicans who will go on his show once in a while, or more than once in a while. But and it's like you don't see a bunch of Democrats going on Fox.
But they gotta show up.
Well,
They gotta keep showing up.
I tend to agree, but yeah. So
But you know that the Republicans are paying for that Johnson's ad. So
corporations are
yeah, well, whoever's paying for
Right.
it, someone's paying for it.
right.
And the Democrats could do the same thing.
They have a lot more money,
Yeah.
and I think what Democrats might be doing right now is Tammy's going to need help, and I think they're sitting on money for that. Would be my guess. But you're not going to see. Every once in a while, you might see an environmental group run a statewide ad, for example, on a specific issue, saying that this is coming forward. Call so and so and tell them they're doing a great job or a bad job. That happens once in a while, but corporations have that much money. So, yes, sir.
Any chance there'll be action on the dark store bill that was overturned?
The dark store bill is just so you guys know, it's a massive. It would be a massive property tax hit. Dark store is the big stores, the Walmarts of the world, and so on. And they're trying not to pay taxes. And it would be a huge, tax increase, if we don't pass legislation. So legislation basically says that, you know, and it's the way, and I can't explain it correctly, you probably can, it's the way they set up the store. You see, it's a Walmart store, but not really, it's another entity, isn't it, that owns the building?
The theory, as I understand it, is they want to be taxed as if they were the store that was empty.
Right.
And not enclosed because it hasn't got any business, when they're actually doing a very good business.
They're doing an awesome business. And so, we need to develop legislation that basically says that they have to pay property taxes like everybody else does. And this bill has bipartisan support, but I don't know if it has strong enough bipartisan support. It has a lot of support from all the Democrats, but I don't know if enough Republicans are there. But I can tell you, if we don't do something, it's a substantial property tax increase. And the governor's, you know, bragging about that we don't pay property, you know, cutting property taxes there, and you know, we're gonna cut property taxes. He can't say that and then turn around and support that decision, because it's a substantial property tax increase. I got time for one or two more questions and I have to get home.
Was there something that happened on small mobile reactors that I missed?
On small what?
Mobile reactors, nuclear reactors?
Not that I've heard.
Okay. I'm just wondering because they, you know, a couple years ago, they dismantled the Wisconsin Clean Power legislation, and then it was the nuclear people that were trying to get something, that were really pushing to dismantle it, the affordability part and the safety part.
I haven't heard anything about that in the state. Mostly what they've been dealing with in the state is taking away local control environmental regulations. They're dealing, you know, there's some wetland stuff coming up that's not good. There's another piece of legislation coming up that's really not good, that deals with navigable waters. Keep an eye on that. It's a very, very, very bad piece of legislation that came out of committee. God, I sounded like Trump there, didn't I? Very, very. I'm sorry about that. You know, I think there might be a PTSD Trump-related thing. I am shell-shocked, just shocked, to the point where I'm numb every time you just turn on the TV.
That's the goal.
It is. Anyways, I'll get over it. Anything else at all? Yes.
Are you involved with the fight against this ATC transmission line? Do you know anything about that? The company is trying to put that transmission line through the southwestern part of the state.
Right, I think Blackhawk.
Right here, it's gonna cover
yeah.
through here.
And I don't think ATC's made any ruling on it yet. I think, is public comment still open? For it, or is it closed?
There's still meetings going on.
Okay.
ATC in fact has not made their application.
Has not, so they haven't decided.
Yeah, and I expect, because I'm putting together a resolution at the county level.
Okay.
In opposition. Back in May, my committee had a hearing up in Wisconsin Heights, invited ATC, who of course did not show up. But the 25 area residents that showed up said, you know, our property values have already gone down just with the threat of this. You're probably aware that out west of here, Iowa County has passed a resolution, Village of Mount Horeb has passed a resolution, town of Springdale. The goal of some of the folks out west is to have enough public turmoil that ATC might see the writing on the wall and not even. And so, but it'll probably hit the fan in the spring.
Okay. All right, and I have a number of issues with it, and I think we talked about it last time I was out here. I don't want Wisconsin to become a freeway for power to go from one state to another state and have to pass through Wisconsin, because we're not gonna get it. I've always had a problem with that, with any new project that ATC puts up as that. In some parts of the state, we are using a little bit more. In other parts, we're using a little bit less. Is there enough to justify a line like this? I don't know if the numbers have supported that or not. But in the end, the overall writing concern is, are you gonna build this so an energy company can transfer energy from state A through state B to get to state C? And we'd be state B in this situation. And, that makes me really uncomfortable. So, and it's good to hear that local governments are gonna start to deal with resolutions on this, because we'll get them, they all come to us, because I know you guys send them to us.
Well, so far, they ignored our resolution last May, in which we asked the PSC to conduct a cost-benefit analysis.
No,
And that's the reason that we're now putting together this, well, we're just gonna say no, if you don't even wanna address
right.
that, then, we're pretty convinced from the
Right.
people that have come to us that we don't need it.
Right. Okay, I'll keep an eye on what you guys are doing, so. And, Dane County delegation usually takes its lead from the Dane County board on issues like this, so.
Well, unfortunately, the chairman of the board is more influenced by this is named Tyler Hibner of Renew, who claims that, well, this is let's kind of do it for, clean energy, and in fact, there are no guarantees that this line is gonna carry that. In fact, it'll carry the least costly energy, which is coal and gas.
Yeah, well, keep an eye on it, so. Thanks for having me out, thanks for coming on this Saturday night, I appreciate it, it's good to see you.
Thanks for you coming out this
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah, well, it gets me out of the house, so that's good, so yeah.